So the sermon title for today, Not My Will, but Your Will Be Done. So I grew up, I feel like very fortunate. I grew up in a loving home. We never had a lot of money, but we never felt like we were lacking anything. But I was always so happy. We loved the Lord. We went to church. I really enjoyed spending time with God, reading my Bible. And I just distinctly remember that I was always laughing. I was always laughing, always had a lot of friends. And my life just felt really great. But then at the end of my high school, I went and started studying, and I finished my studies. And that's when something started changing in me. I think when I started looking at the potential of the money that I could make in the profession that I chose, I really started desiring the wealth that it could create. And my focus started moving away from God in a big way, because I was just so focused on making it in life, showing people that I did make it, the potential of the money and wealth, what it could bring and what it could mean for myself. And I distinctly remember that I wanted to do it my way. I never consulted God. I never asked him what he had planned for my life. I was dead set on following my own path and making it in life. It reminds me of the prodigal son. So I would like us to read Luke 15:11-14. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the youngest son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. Now, what's important for me is, we all know the story. But what's important for me is, like myself, the son never went to ask his father, what was the will? What was your will, God? What was your will for my life? No, he like myself, wanted to go down this path, because at the end of it, he was like, I'm going to live this romantic life with nice cars and good friends, and impress people with what I have. I guess that's the only, reason why people want to be really wealthy. But never did I go to God and say, "But Lord, what do you want for my life?" The only thing that I was focused on is what I could get out of it. And I think the same thing would be for the prodigal son. If he went to his father and just said, "But Father, what do you see for my life?" He would have told him, "Son, do not go down this path, because there is no happiness at the end of this path." But like with God, he gives us free will to make our own choices. And I made a choice, and the prodigal son also made a choice. So this is the story of how I got lost. So for a brief moment in history, in time, I did in fact become fairly wealthy. The job that I received shortly after I finished my studies was a fairly small company, and we wrote the software that became very popular and very successful. And a bigger company bought us out. They made us partners in the company, and then eventually directors, and they gave us a lot of shares in the company. And then the company listed on the JSE, and the share price of this company went from less than R1 to more than 40 Rand in a very short time. It was also in the late 1990s where all technical companies just went through this boom, and Everyone was buying up technical stocks. So everyone that worked in this company at the time became millionaires. Even the tea lady, and I'm not kidding you, the tea lady was at that point in time a millionaire. And I remember my managing director coming to me one day and he said to me, Anton, I really feel that you just need to sell all your shares. You can become financially independent if you do that. But already something set in my heart, and that was greed. Greed came into my heart because I wanted more than what was enough, probably. I wanted more money. And I said to my managing director, listen, man, we are about to launch this company overseas. I really feel like the share price is going to double. And he just shook his head and he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. But I was 22, 23 years old and completely stupid, not knowing anything. And so we eventually took a team across to the US. We started a company in Miami. And this picture was so interesting because I asked ChatGPT to generate me this picture. And ChatGPT still got some challenges with faces. So if you look carefully at the faces, you're going to laugh because, like the guy on the right, I'm not sure if he's a man or a dog, but they look quite scary. But in my life that I lived in Miami, I actually came across a lot of these people that was just completely godless. We lived a luxurious life. I lived on South Beach in a condo overlooking the Miami Harbor, and we would frequent a strip that looked very much like this. In fact, it was in Washington Road, which is, if you look at South Beach, if you watch movies and series like Miami Vice, they always have a flyover from the ocean onto like Beach Road with the iconic strip. And the road just above it was Washington Road. And we lived very close to that. And the people that I've met during this time was into drugs. They were, in fact, very godless. And God, I just want to say that God still protected me from any sexual sin during this time. But I did have my run-in with people that was quite far removed from God. And I personally didn't attend church anymore. I think God was for a great part a fairly distant memory in that time. I don't think God ever left me. God protected me in a great way still, but I definitely was not focused on God anymore because money started completely consuming our lives. The money that we could make, the money that ruled our lives, the cars and the clothes and the places we lived. So an interesting thing happened not long after we arrived in the US. The dot bomb happened. So if you know your economics, in the late 1990s there was an economic crash or a tech bubble crash. And all technical companies, all the dot-coms bombed. They crashed. And we were one of them. Our share price went from very high to nothing in a very, very short time. And everything was wiped away. And after we closed down, I, for a few extra years, did work in other companies in the US. But I definitely didn't have the wealth that I used to have. And I often think about this, what would have happened if this company of ours did not crash? It had the potential to become a multi-billion-dollar company for what we were aiming for. But if you go and you listen to interviews of Jim Carrey, one of the things that he said at one point was he in fact really wished that everyone could be wealthy and famous so that they can realize that it is not the answer in life. I saw an interview the other day, Stephen Bartlett, if I say his name correctly, was having an interview with Mr. Beast a few weeks ago. And in his interview, he asked Mr. Beast, and Mr. Beast, if you don't know him, he's the #1 YouTuber in the world and worth billions. And he asked Mr. Beast in the interview, are you happy? And he's like, I'm not. And you could see that in his demeanor and the way that he was talking, it's like he was actually fairly depressed. And if you look at people that are famous and have a lot of money, it doesn't mean that they are happy. It doesn't mean that they have it all made. For a lot more cases than not, you'll see that those people, in fact, are extremely unhappy. They are depressed. People commit suicide. They get divorced. So I often think that if God did not maybe save me from it, and I was successful, I most probably would have continued down this path, this life that was extremely money focused. I would have most probably married someone that was not from God, that came with this life. And I cannot see that I would not have been ending up in the same way that a lot of these other people do, being extremely unhappy, even if you have all the wealth in the world. So a lot of time passed between that time and where I'm going on now. But I want to read Luke 15 verse 14. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So quite a few years after my time in the US, I lived in Cape Town. And I remember that I was still chasing after this dream of being wealthy. But I was also living that lifestyle. So I wanted to live on the beach with the cars and the clothes and stuff. So I didn't really have the money to live that lifestyle. So what did I do? I went into debt. And for some time I definitely reached the bottom of the pit, just like the prodigal son did. I was really clinically depressed. For a few times, and it's horrible to say it, but a few times I did consider committing suicide. And I reached a really, really dark time in my life. And I remember clearly on one day, I just remember saying to myself, I need to get back to God. I need to get back to the church. And it's difficult to put everything down here because it will just take way too much time to talk about everything. But I did get baptized in the US, and my journey did start changing. But I also, when I came back to South Africa for some time, didn't attend the church. But again, I would just like to read this passage of the prodigal son, Luke 15 verse 17. It says that, but when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father. And I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. So I went into this church and I decided I am going to serve the Lord. I am going to do whatever I can, but I just put my name up for everything. I did car park, worship, technical things, design whatever they needed me, I did it. And like doing car park was where I believe God started doing a work in me, because it was a terrible job. Like in Cape Town, winter, sleeting, rain, cold like crazy. You were standing under an umbrella, showing people to parking spaces. And I remember it was just so humbling. Coming down from a time where I was extremely arrogant, prideful, God had to start doing a work in me. He knew the person that I was. He knew what the will for my life was, but He had to do a work on me. I wasn't ready in the condition that I was at that point in time. In a different church, I remember Faith and I actually, we would arrive in the mornings at our church with a vacuum cleaner in our hand and rubber gloves, scrubbing toilets, cleaning floors. And yeah, I mean, I've cleaned a lot of toilets in my life during serving God. But for me, something that stood out from the prodigal son is he went back to the father and he's like, I am going to just serve you. For me, that was the critical thing. It's like, God, my life can change only by serving you. So I was, while I was preparing this message, I came across this passage here in Matthew 6:22 verse 24. It really has started to make me think deeply about my life choices. And even today, standing here or giving this message, I'm wrestling with this. Because for the past few years, I've still been very focused on making my businesses work and financial success. But I would like to read to you this Matthew 6 verse 22 to 24. It says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Man, that like little second part of this passage is like almost like a riddle. It's if then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? And then verse 24, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So I started digging a little bit into these verses. And so firstly, the eye is the lamp of the body. Back in those days, they believed that the light that came through your eyes actually enlightened your inner being. But symbolically, the eye represents our focus, our desires, and our perception. So what we choose to set our hearts and minds on. So if we focus on God's truth and righteousness and His kingdom, we will be spiritually healthy and full of light. But then the second part is, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. And this really, this really struck me, is the word healthy there, the Greek for it is haplous, which also means single or undivided. This implies singleness of purpose, sincerity and clarity of vision towards God. That singleness of purpose is such a big thing for me, because it again just talks about the fact that, where our minds set, where's our focus? Am I focused on making money, or am I focused on God? And then in verse 23, but if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And then a bad eye, the Greek for that bad eye word is poneros, which referred to spiritual blindness, moral corruption, and a divided heart. And again, it's that divided heart. Where is my heart set? Am I set on making money with no end in sight? So often, if you ask really wealthy people, what is enough money, they cannot answer you. They don't know what the end goal is. They just want to make more money. Or is my heart set on building the kingdom, serving God, advancing what God's will is for my life? So if we are focused on sinful desires, greed, which I believe for a long time I've been focused on, and worldly distractions, we'll be spiritually blind and stumbling in the darkness. Oh my goodness. And then the second part of verse 23. So if then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Now this little second passage really threw me and this past few weeks preparing this message. Because I come to realize that if I believe that I live a life for God, but my mind is still focused on making money for my own gain, then how deep is this darkness? I think that's the thing, is if we're deceived by the fact that the light in us, what we think is light, is in fact not light, but it's darkness. How great is that darkness then? And it's indeed a very scary warning. And I've been wrestling with this for this past few weeks because I have a business, and my business is focused on making money, and I'm still probably dreaming of how to make it work. But for what reason am I doing it? What is the end goal? Is my end goal to buy the plane or the yacht or the house on the beach or going on fancy holidays? Or am I directed towards building the kingdom of God? So I believe not everyone can work for the church. So I do believe that wealth will be given to some people, but the wealth that should be, that if I receive that, should be used to go towards building the kingdom. If my focus is not anymore for greed or selfish reasons, but to build a kingdom, then I think it's okay. But I guess the question is, what is that? What is the will of God in my life? Am I again just exercising my own will? Or am I looking at or asking God, what do you will for my life? What is this? What am I doing? What am I doing? So there's a verse at the end of Matthew 6 that says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you, all your desires." So for the past 7 years, or 8 years, probably 9 years now, I made a choice to start building a business away from a corporate life. And I've been chasing hard to make it work. And for a long time, I really have been struggling to make it work. And I have to start thinking about the fact that maybe if I'm not getting this right, is it the will of God in my life? But anyway, we had to sell one of our cars during this time, and we were left with Faith's car that was very old. And it was difficult for me to ride around this car because it is quite a little skadonk. And again, I think God allowed it because it was a humbling process for me. I couldn't buy the fancy clothes that I was used to. I had to drive in a car that would turn some heads because it is quite dinged up. And but yeah, God definitely did a work there as well. But what happened after that is what makes me think really hard about this verse, because about a little bit more than a year ago, someone in church blessed us with a brand new car. And I was so prideful, because Faith has always been saying, you know what, she really feels that God is going to give us a car. And I didn't want it at all because I was prideful. I was like, I don't want anyone to give us a car. Like, I'll buy my own car. But someone gave us a brand new car in church. And may they be blessed, whoever they are, because we don't know who they are. And then a few months ago, like probably 6 months ago, we joined the White River Church, and we felt God want us, that's the will of God for us to be there. We were still living in a house in Nelspruit, and we wanted to move, but we couldn't sell this house. Like for more than a year. It was in the market, brought the price down, no one was interested. And then Guy and Cheryl called us one day aside, and they said to us, you know what, guys, we would like for you to get involved in the Malalaan church plant. And but something that Guy said to me at that moment was so profound, because he said that he just really feels that there's a spiritual battle raging around us at the moment. And if we make this step, everything is just going to fall in place. And once we made a decision to do it, within 2 to 3 weeks, our house had an offer and it was sold. And then we had to look for a new house. And we had this dream. We've been talking about it for years, that the house that we did live in was, although absolutely lovely, had a very small garden, and there was one tree in it. The kids couldn't play there really. Couldn't ride their bikes. There was no place to really ride their bikes. And we were like, we just really want something that's big, that has a big garden, that lots of trees where kids can play. That was our heart's desire. And when we started looking for a house, we were looking at houses that was so expensive and not even nearly to what we were dreaming about. It was just the rental market was through the roof. It was just unattainable. I would have probably do work for corporates again to just afford living in these houses. And then again, someone in church let us know that there was a house that just came available, and we went to look at this. And I wish you could see this place. The house is enormous. The hallway is so big you can probably park a little smart car in the hallway. The grass, the lawn is probably in excess of 2 hectares. There are more trees than you can count. And it was just absolutely everything that we dreamed about. Plus some. And at a price that was less than what we paid for the house in Nelspruit. And it just made me realize that if we seek God first, if we live in the will of God, everything will be given to you. If I was the man that I used to be, I would have, in my will, I would have tried to kick open doors everywhere. I probably would have eventually found a place that would have cost me so much money that I would have had to work 10 times harder in order to just afford the place to live in. But that was not the will of God. And definitely not the will of God for where He wants us to be and to take us. I remember when I was a student, and this is the last point. When I was a student, this guy came to our university. His name is Louis Brits. So some of you might know him. He was an absolute pioneer in Afrikaans worship music at the time. And he didn't come to sing that day. He came to preach. And I so clearly remember him saying that he wants to ask a very dangerous question today. And he said, if you're willing to come to the front, stretch out your arms and say, God, let your will be done in my life and not my will, then come to the front. And I did. And I distinctly remember that it was a very serious choice that I made that day. And perhaps because I made that decision that day, Nothing I ever tried financially worked very well. And I'm very thankful for that, because God's will is much better in my life. But I want to ask this of you today. I want to ask you, are you willing to come to the front, to stretch out your arms and say, "You know what, God, your will be done in my life and not my will anymore."